And welcome back to Game Escape. Today I'm here with a hardware review of the Nintendo Wii U. It's been about 8 months since Nintendo released the console, and I thought it was a good time right now to take a look at the system, kind of look at where it is 8 months in to its life on the market, and then pull back a little bit and talk about what the Wii U means for Nintendo and where Nintendo is going as a company. So, just a little bit of a background story behind why I picked up the Wii U. I've been collecting video games for really most of my life. As a kid, just sort of begging for games and systems as gifts, and then as a teenager and an adult, collecting and purchasing these systems and games. And it occurred to me last November that for all the games that I've purchased and for all the systems that I've owned, I've never actually owned a system at launch. So because of that, I said, well, let me pick up the Nintendo Wii U. There was nothing about the system, there was nothing about the technology in the system that I found inherently interesting. I just wanted to be in, if not on day one, on week one. I picked it up during the launch week. And my initial impressions of the system were actually very good. It was kind of a novelty, and I enjoyed the controller. I thought it was... my impression of the controller when I first got it home and started playing with it was that Nintendo was actually trying to create a DS or a 3DS experience on the couch. And for that, I would say probably that entire holiday season, maybe from when I picked it up, first, I don't know if it was the third week of November through January 1st or 2nd or whenever my holiday break ended, I was really enjoying the system, playing it every day. I'd actually wake up in the morning, try to play like a half hour before work. It was a really engaging system, but I think now, having owned it for a while, stepping back now that I've had it for about 8 months, I can say that there are some really severe problems that need to be addressed by Nintendo before this console can be relevant. And as much as I like the system, at launch, one of the problems that immediately stood out was the launch lineup. There just was not enough substance there, particularly because a lot of the games I already owned on other systems. You know, Batman, Arkham City, the Assassin's Creed game. I'm not a big Call of Duty fan. They had the 2K basketball game. So, you know, right off the bat, I was in a position where the only two unique games at launch were Nintendo Land and New Super Mario Bros. U, which, as you can see here, I picked up the white console, which meant I had to buy those games, and then I bought the only two games that I hadn't played on other systems, which were the Tekken Tag Tournament game and Sonic All-Stars Racing Transformed. That was what I came home with. That was kind of the package with which I tried to entertain myself in that initial launch window. And as I said, the first month, I had some time, it was cool, it was a novelty, it was fun. So, you know, Nintendo Land, we'll start off with Nintendo Land. A lot of people derided that game for being just a tech demo, and I was of the opinion that it was, you know, it was more than a tech demo, but it was also less than a full game. And it was the game, you know, it didn't sell the system, but it was an advertisement for the system. Look at all of the different things that this platform can do. And certainly, again, holiday time, friends and family coming over, Nintendo Land was a lot of fun, but it had some drawbacks, particularly the fact that there was no online multiplayer. So it was this great local multiplayer experience, but, you know, how often do you have a room of 3 or 4 people? And, you know, the most I had were sort of 2 other friends coming over and playing it. And that was fun, but once you stepped away from that, being locked out of games like Mario Chase and Luigi's Mansion, if you didn't have that extra player, I think was problematic. And so once I kind of got a high score in the single-player games, I just had to put it down. Tekken Tag Tournament was a good game. You know, I like Tekken, and invariably I pick up every Tekken game that's released. I'm not great at it, but for whatever reason I love Tekken 2 on the PlayStation 1, and since then I've just purchased every one of them. $60 was a fairly steep price point for that game, and you know, I was just starved for games that I haven't played. So it's fun. It's Tekken. It's got the beach ball mode. It, I think, doesn't control particularly well on the gamepad, or even with the Pro Controller. I actually play with the combination of the nunchuck and the old classic controller for the Wii, and I think that's pretty responsive. But again, how long can you play Tekken, even if you're playing online? And so that, you know, again, good solid 2-3 weeks of playing that every day, put it down afterwards. I also picked up Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed, which honestly is a really, really good kart racing game, but I also noticed some issues with the graphics on the Wii U. To me, it didn't look as bright and as crisp as the previous game, which I owned on the Xbox 360. That having been said, it was fun, and again, in that month's time, I did get some enjoyment out of it. And then lastly, New Super Mario Bros. U. I really, really enjoyed it. You know, I wasn't one of those people who got on Nintendo for just cranking out another 2D side-scrolling Mario game. It was a lot of fun. This was the game, this was the style of game, you know, Super Mario Brothers, 2D side-scrolling adventures. This is what got me in to gaming in the first place. So, you know, I'll always buy them, and they'll always have kind of a soft spot in my heart. They're terrific games. I will say, however, that the new Super Mario Bros. U game was not enough. Nintendo needed really a killer app. They needed a game that the early adopters could take and really lose themselves in, be immersed in for at least 2 months. You know, a game that would give you a solid 60 to 80 hours of gameplay, or that had such a terrific online component or replay value that you would just constantly come back. And that's what they did not deliver. And you add that to this really sparse, you know, lineup of third-party titles. If you had already owned the other systems and played them on the other systems, you know, that was problem number one that I had early on. And really, come mid-January, the system was shut off and collecting dust because there was just nothing else to play. And I think even to this day, to the date of this recording, there really is not that much to play. And what's coming down the pike from third-party developers, you've got the Need for Speed game. You have, I believe they were going to release a version of Deus Ex Human Revolution. Now, I have those games on the PC, so not too much for me to play. I know that Monster Hunter, I think Tri Ultimate, the Monster Hunter game for the Wii U, got some praise. That having been said, I never really could get into Monster Hunter, so I passed on that. I do want to play Lego City, and I will likely wait until that drops a little bit in price. It's not one of my biggest priorities at this moment, but I will look to pick it up at some point. And I just did order and this was the first Wii U purchase since launch, I just ordered a Tank. It was in the Amazon daily deal or something for $20, and at that price I wanted to give it a try. Certainly not worth. I believe it was priced at $50 when it came out, because again, it does not have the online multiplayer. Over the course of time, there were some other problems that cropped up. Number one is I think that, you know, the gamepad, yes, it's light, but I think if we're being honest, it feels a little cheap. Maybe that's because just I have the white one, but I can't imagine the black one is any different. I mean, it's not bad, and the game, you know, your gameplay is in no way compromised by it, but it does, I think, over time start to feel a little cheap. And for me, anyway, the A, B, Y, and X buttons are not as responsive when you're, you know, tapping rapid fire, particularly in New Super Mario Bros. U. I've also had various connectivity issues and loading issues where, you know, I'll put a game in, I'll go to load it, it might try to update, and then it will crash, and the system will actually shut off. That happened to me twice, and I had a spell back in the spring where it just would not connect to the eShop, and it would not download updates at all. And I had to do a tech call to Nintendo support. It was a fairly long and involved one, and the resolution was that I had to go into my router and change around some of the DNS settings, I believe, and, you know, I'm fairly competent when it comes to home networking issues, but I would have never come to that conclusion on my own. Sometimes, with certain routers, apparently, you have to enter a specific type of DNS configuration. So, you know, there were those nights when I did turn it on, but I had these issues, and ultimately shut it off. So what's coming down as far as new games from Nintendo? Well, still not much. We've got Pikmin 3 coming out in about a week and a half. I'm not a huge Pikmin fan, and you know, maybe I'll pick it up if I have some time that weekend, but, you know, Rayman, I was looking forward to Rayman. That got pushed back to September, and you know, it's a situation where you have this system that, in spite of these problems, has some potential, it has some charm, but at the moment there is just really not much to do with it. So now that I've aired some of my personal issues with the console, I want to pull back a little bit and look at what this means for Nintendo. What is the state of Nintendo today? And I really see them as a company that is battling with a lot of internal contradictions, and that's why I put the Nintendo 3DS out here on the table. This, to me, represents kind of the greatest contradiction within Nintendo, is that they have a handheld system with which they are doing everything right. The 3DS right now is an absolutely incredible video game system, and I find myself, you know, when I'm, quote, playing Nintendo, I'm playing the 3DS and not the Wii U. The 3DS has, I think, a very clear direction. It has those great first-party Nintendo titles. It has some, I think, pretty interesting 3D downloadable titles, and it is increasingly becoming the platform on which you purchase your JRPGs. And to me, it's working. It has this is very focused third-party support, and I find myself constantly picking up games for it. Not worried about you know, the retail price of $40 when there's a good 3DS game. I'm picking it up, and you know, the Wii U is really nowhere near that level. And you can say, well, hey, the 3DS had problems at launch. It didn't have a lot of games. You had the whole price cut, and then giving people who bought it at full price the Nintendo Ambassadors program. But I don't really see any signs of the Wii U making a course correction. And by the way, in 2011, you did have Super Mario 3D Land, which I think is an absolute killer app for the 3DS, and really proved how the 3D technology can be essential to a great game. You don't have that with the Wii U. I think also very, very troubling was an incredibly weak presentation at E3, where the Wii U saw a lot of, really just kind of safe games and safe announcements. I mean, yes, I'm looking forward to Super Mario 3D World again. It was a great game. I'm not sure how it will play without that 3D capability, but we'll see. And just this idea. I mean, you have Smash Brothers, you have Mario Kart. Those are the staples. Well, I believe maybe they also announced at E3 or around that time that they were working towards a Fire Emblem cross Shin Megami Tensei, which is really exciting and great, and I'm into that. But the game I came away from that presentation most excited for was Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past sequel. And, you just look at Sony and Microsoft in, having historic grand press conferences, and then Nintendo doing the Nintendo Direct, and there was some video of, Reggie Fils-Aimé sort of shouting in a corner, and it just seems like they are not a major player, and kind of their response was, well, it was so expensive, it's so cost prohibitive to, do a major press conference, and I'm sure they're right about that, but to have to justify that and come out with that rationale to your fan base just makes you seem like a bit player compared to Sony and Microsoft. And this is a problem because you have a company that is arguing, hey, software sells systems, but they do not have any unique and compelling software, and they just lack third-party support, with, I believe, EA saying that they're not going to support the Wii U, and Ubisoft saying that they don't have any games in production right now. I mean, this is a huge problem, especially considering the fact that, from a technology standpoint, now that we know what's inside the PS4, now that we know what's inside of the Xbox, frankly, the Wii U cannot compete on that level. And I think even in terms of online services, they are really far behind what you're going to see on those platforms. So, if you cannot present a series of compelling software titles for the system, where is it going? Another, I think, major contradiction that has come up recently within Nintendo is their policy of video blocking. We just had the EVO 2013 tournament and the whole controversy with Nintendo wanting to, they sent a cease and desist order wanting the EVO people to block the stream of Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is now a 10-year-old game, but an extremely popular title that everyone loves, and it would have given them tremendous press ahead of the release of Super Smash Bros. On the Wii U, but they block that. They go after YouTubers and try to monetize their videos if they have Nintendo content in them. I mean, they're getting free press, and they're in essence pissing off their the hardest of the hardcore fan base that loves Nintendo, that wants to expend time and energy and effort in creating content that praises Nintendo for what they did in the past and what they're doing now, and then you're going to go after those people. It is just a terrible policy, and you wonder to what degree this company is aware of how that's affecting their reputation within this community. I think it's this is sort of a broader point, but another troubling thing that you're seeing Nintendo doing now with the Wii U is it's the second generation where they decided to embrace an aging technology and add a gimmick. And I may take some flack for saying, well, that the Wii U's motion controls were a gimmick, but I think ultimately that's what they were, and that sort of wore thin long term. And there are some great games that utilize it in interesting ways. I mean, I think Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are two of the best games ever made, and you know, they utilize that technology. But I mean, ultimately, after a couple of years, you know, the Wii, the original Wii, just sort of ran its course. And now you have a situation where you have the Wii U. Yes, it's a tablet, but I think pretty much any mainstream consumer tablet is going to vastly outperform the screen that's on the Wii U. And in fact, when you have that, and I talked about how you have that 3DS effect from your couch, well, you do, but the one thing I've noticed is how washed out the screen looks in comparison to, you know, your gorgeous big screen HD TV. And it's a bad screen. I mean, yeah, it has some ghosting, but it's very responsive, and you know, excuse me, it doesn't have ghosting, but it has some light bleed, at least on this model. But you know, it is not a high quality tablet that allows you to do what, you know, even if you have like a Motorola Zoom, you know, what you can do on something like that. So, you know, you just wonder what this company is thinking. I mean, why not come out with a product? It doesn't have to be PS4, Xbox One level, but come out with a technology standard that will definitely last for, you know, 4, 5, 6 years. I don't think they have that here with this system. Now, people will say, well, you know, give developers time, but are developers actually developing for this system right now? Now, I realize that I have been kind of negative on the Wii U, but, you know, I'm not a fanboy for Sony or Microsoft. I'm not a Nintendo hater. I actually love Nintendo, and I want to see them succeed with this system. So I came up with my own personal Wii U wish list, kind of some things that I think they can do to breathe life into this console. I mean, I want the Nintendo that's behind the 3DS. I mean, I want that Nintendo. I want that feeling that I get from the 3DS to kind of transfer over to the Wii. And so that would be my point one, is focus your console. You know, the 3DS has a very, very, as I said, a very, very clear direction. And I think for the Wii U, you know, just adopt that direction. You know, make Nintendo about what the 3DS is currently about. You know, you've got the great first-party titles, yes, but, you know, focus on the JRPGs, the puzzle games, cater to gamers who have a taste for Japanese-style games, or who, you know, just have retro tastes. I mean, for example, you know, imagine an SNES-style RPG, you know, with high-def visuals, a gigantic narrative scope, and gamepad integration. And I think if you just released games like that, you would, I think you'd have a very, very unique console, because you cannot play those games in a lot of other places. I think they need to, and this is kind of tied with that, you know, adapt and reimagine some of their lesser-known franchises and IPs. Yes, it's great to have, you know, always have Smash Brothers games and Mario games, whether it's 3D Land or Galaxy or the new Super Mario Brothers series. But Nintendo has so many IPs that they can just take and, you know, even if the games weren't great, you know, take them, just creatively reimagine them, create new and engaging experiences. I mean, it's games like Ice Climbers and Uniracers come to mind, and then there are many. But even a better example, Earthbound. We finally have Earthbound on the Virtual Console. But wouldn't it have been nice if they had packaged that together with Earthbound or Mother 3, which was on the GBA in Japan, and released them as a kind of joint package, or give them a high-definition remake? Or even better, you know, they go to E3 and announce everything they did, but they're major announcement at the end to end the show, to go off the stage or end the Nintendo Direct, is to say that we are developing a new high-definition 3D Earthbound game, and it's coming out in 2014. I mean, that right there, I think that announcement would have sold systems. But for whatever reason, they've up until now refused to even acknowledge the fact that there's a huge Earthbound fan base here in the United States. I think they can also do what I'll call Miiverse Player's Guide. So the Miiverse is great. It's one of the best features of this system, but maybe have kind of like a spiritual successor to the old Nintendo Power Player's Guides, and you could sort of access it in-game. It's a live document, and, you know, get those tips and tricks and watch, you know, videos of boss battles or something like that right on the gamepad, right, you know, suspend the game, look at that, come back to playing the game. And I think that would just be cool and a nod to those of us who grew up with Nintendo Power and those players' guides. I think all games should have off-TV play. I know most games do, I think, at this point, but even if it's you know, a game that features asymmetrical gameplay, you know, have some aspect of the game that you can take and play offline. And I think lastly, you know, release a patch to make it region-free. And if Nintendo did all of that, I think that this would be a much more compelling console, not only for me, but for the public out there who has yet to purchase one. You know, when the system was released, I think I wrote a review on Amazon, I believe, or it might have been GameStop, GameSpot maybe, I don't know. I wrote a review, and I said that I think Nintendo is positioning this console to be the second console, and that was actually a pretty smart move because there is no competition currently for the second console status. And, you know, if, again, you know, having that clear direction, coming up with a product that has, you know, compelling software titles, can still achieve that goal. And I think, you know, certainly the 3DS, once I saw the types of games that are coming out for that system on a monthly basis, it was an automatic purchase because I think in a certain way, the Nintendo brand speaks to people who grew up in the era of the NES and the SNES. And this is the customer base right now that has some disposable income that can gladly, if the product is engaging and compelling enough, say, you know what, no problem. Got my Xbox One, I've got my PS4, but there is always a place under my television for Nintendo. And they have to realize that because, you know, to me, that should be their goal. That should be their market. And it seemed like that was the idea going in, but again, lots of contradictory behavior from this, and I still believe they are a great company. I'm not going to say once great company. So, I love Nintendo, I want the Wii U to succeed, and I am hoping and waiting for some great news coming out of Nintendo with regard to the Wii U. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time on Game Escape.